Commander Sarah Chun adjusted her uniform as she stepped off the transport shuttle onto the crystalline surface of Zephyria Prime. The alien world sparkled under twin suns, its surface covered in structures that seemed to grow rather than be built. Around her, the diplomatic convoy moved with practiced efficiency, but Sarah could feel the weight of countless alien eyes watching their every step. The Zephyrian delegation awaited them at the base of a massive spire that stretched impossibly high into the purple sky. These beings stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies resembling elongated praying mantises made of living metal. Their joints moved with fluid precision, and their limbs bent in ways that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Sarah knew. Ambassador Kethver stepped forward, his metallic head tilting in what their xenobiologists had identified as a greeting gesture. When he spoke, the translation device rendered his clicking sounds into crisp English. "Welcome, humans, to our world. We have prepared accommodations for your limited mobility." Sarah noticed the slight pause before limited mobility and exchanged a glance with her second-in-command, Lieutenant Rodriguez. The briefing materials had mentioned that Zephyrians possessed extraordinary agility, but this seemed like more than a cultural observation. As they moved toward the guest quarters, Sarah observed the Zephyrian architecture with growing amazement. Buildings twisted and curved in impossible spirals, with walkways that bridged gaps hundreds of feet wide. The aliens moved through this environment like dancers, leaping between platforms with casual grace, their metallic limbs extending and contracting like springs. "Your people seem very athletic," Sarah commented to Ambassador Kethver as they walked along a ground-level path, clearly constructed for their human guests. The ambassador's mandibles clicked in what the translation software indicated was amusement. "We find it curious that your species developed intelligence despite such restricting physical limitations. Your joints, particularly these knees our scientists have studied, seem so fragile, so inflexible." Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped closer to Sarah, his jaw tightening. She placed a subtle hand on his arm, maintaining diplomatic composure despite the clear condescension in the alien's tone. "Every species adapts differently to their environment," Sarah replied diplomatically. "Perhaps you could show us more of how your people move through your cities? We're eager to learn." What followed was clearly intended as a demonstration of Zephyrian superiority. Ambassador Kethver led them to an observation platform overlooking the main city. From this vantage point, they watched as Zephyrians bounded between buildings with impossible leaps, their legs extending like telescopes to cover distances that would require aircraft for humans. Young Zephyrians played games that involved ricocheting off walls and ceiling surfaces, their movements so fluid they seemed to flow rather than jump. Military units practiced maneuvers that included vertical assaults up sheer cliff faces and horizontal leaps across chasms that stretched for hundreds of yards. "Our warriors can scale any defense, cross any barrier," Kethver explained with obvious pride. "We have conquered 17 worlds not through superior weapons, but through our natural ability to go where our enemies thought impossible. No fortress can contain us. No wall can stop us." Dr. Martinez, the team xenobiologist, studied the aliens' movements with fascination. "Their leg structure is remarkable," she whispered to Sarah. "Those joints can extend to nearly triple their normal length. The muscle fibers appear to be metallic composites that store and release energy like springs." But Sarah was thinking about more than biology. She was thinking about warfare, about the implications of what they were seeing. If humans ever came into conflict with the Zephyrians, traditional defensive strategies would be useless. Walls, trenches, fortifications, none of it would matter against an enemy that could simply leap over any obstacle. That evening, during the formal dinner, the condescension became more pronounced. Zephyrian officials shared stories of their conquests, always emphasizing how they had overcome defensive positions that other species thought impregnable. They spoke of worlds where the inhabitants had built massive walls, only to watch helplessly as Zephyrian forces simply bounded over them. "Tell us," Kethver asked during dessert, "how do humans conduct warfare with such limited mobility?" Your knees bend in only one direction, and even then not very far. How do you overcome obstacles? Sarah felt the entire human delegation tense. This was more than casual curiosity. This felt like intelligence gathering disguised as conversation. Humans have always been adaptable, she answered carefully. We find ways to work within our limitations. A younger Zephyrian, introduced as General Skethmore, leaned forward. We have studied your military history from your data transmissions. Your soldiers crawl through mud, climb slowly over barriers, dig tunnels like insects. It seems so primitive. Lieutenant Rodriguez set down his utensil with enough force to make a small sound. Our methods may look different, but they've proven effective. Against other humans, perhaps, General Skethmore replied. But what would you do against an enemy that could simply leap over your highest walls, that could bound across your deepest trenches in a single jump? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah realized they were being tested, evaluated, perhaps even threatened. The diplomatic mission was taking on the undertones of a military assessment. Dr. Martinez chose that moment to speak up. Your abilities are certainly impressive. But I'm curious about something. With all that leaping and bounding, how do you handle precision tasks? Fine motor control? Detailed engineering work? For the first time, Sarah saw a flicker of something that might have been annoyance across the ambassador's metallic features. We have specialists for such tasks, Kethver admitted. But in warfare, such considerations are secondary to mobility and speed. Sarah filed that information away. Every species had weaknesses, even these seemingly invincible jumping aliens. But right now, she was more concerned about the growing hostility in the room. The next morning brought a formal tour of Zephyrian military facilities. Sarah and her team were shown weapons that could be fired while in mid-leap, armor that absorbed impact energy and redirected it into even higher jumps, and training facilities where young Zephyrians learned to bound between targets like deadly pinballs. Our fortress cities have never fallen, General Skethmore explained as they stood atop a defensive wall that rose nearly 1,000 feet above the surrounding landscape. Even if enemies could reach our world, they would find our positions unassailable. But Sarah was looking at the wall with an engineer's eye. It was tall, yes, but it was also built to defend against attacks from below. The top was relatively undefended because the builders had assumed no enemy could possibly reach it. It's certainly impressive, she agreed. The height alone would deter most conventional attacks. Most? General Skethmore's mandibles clicked. What attack could possibly threaten a wall of this height? Sarah smiled diplomatically. I'm sure your architects considered all possibilities. But privately, she was thinking about human ingenuity, about the countless ways humans had overcome supposedly impossible obstacles throughout their history, about siege towers and scaling ladders, about aircraft and orbital bombardment, about tunnel warfare and clever engineering. That afternoon, during what was supposed to be a cultural exchange, the Zephyrians arranged a series of physical challenges. They set up obstacle courses designed to showcase their jumping abilities and invited the humans to attempt them. The obstacles were clearly impossible for human physiology. Gaps that required 20-foot horizontal leaps, vertical climbs up smooth surfaces, precision landings on platforms barely large enough for a single footstep. Please, Ambassador Kethver gestured toward the course. Show us these human adaptations you spoke of. Sarah felt her team's frustration building. This wasn't cultural exchange. This was humiliation. The aliens wanted to demonstrate human physical inferiority in the most public way possible. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward first. I'll give it a try. What followed was predictably unsuccessful. Rodriguez managed the first few obstacles through pure determination and military fitness, but eventually came to gaps he simply couldn't cross. He tried running starts, creative use of handholds, even attempting to pole vault with a piece of equipment. Nothing worked. Other team members tried different approaches. Dr. Martinez attempted to analyze the obstacles and find alternative solutions. The engineering officer tried to modify the environment to create stepping stones or bridges. But every attempt was met with polite but clear disapproval from their hosts. Modification of the course is not permitted, General Skethmore explained. These challenges must be met with natural ability alone. By evening, the human delegation had been thoroughly demonstrated to be physically inferior in every measurable way. The Zephyrians made no effort to hide their amusement at human limitations. During the final dinner of their visit, the conversation turned to interstellar politics and trade agreements. But underneath the diplomatic language, Sarah sensed something darker. Your species shows promise in certain areas, Ambassador Kethver admitted. Your technology, your manufacturing capabilities, your attention to detail, all impressive. We could see. 6 months after Commander Sarah Chun's return from Zephyria Prime, Earth's military leadership gathered in the underground bunker complex beneath NORAD. The diplomatic mission's findings had sent shockwaves through every military organization on the planet. For the first time in human history, they faced an alien threat that could render traditional defensive strategies completely useless. General Harrison Martinez, no relation to the xenobiologist from the diplomatic team, stood before a holographic display showing Zephyrian movement patterns captured during the visit. The alien's incredible leaping ability was broken down frame by frame, analyzed from every possible angle. Ladies and gentlemen, General Martinez began, we're looking at a complete revolution in warfare. Every military academy textbook, every defensive strategy we've developed over centuries of conflict, it's all obsolete. Admiral Singh leaned forward from her position at the conference table. How long do we have? Sarah, now promoted to colonel after her mission reports, activated another display. Our intelligence suggests the Zephyrians are moving systematically through their target list. 3 worlds have gone dark in the past 4 months. Based on their expansion pattern, we estimate 18 to 24 months before they reach human space. Not much time to reinvent military doctrine, muttered Air Force General Roberts. Which is why we're not going to reinvent it, Sarah replied, surprising the room. We're going to throw it away entirely and build something completely new. The next few hours were unlike any military planning session in human history. Traditional concepts like high ground, choke points, and defensive perimeters became meaningless when discussing an enemy that could bound over buildings in a single leap. Dr. Elizabeth Martinez, the xenobiologist from the diplomatic mission, presented her detailed analysis of Zephyrian physiology. Their jumping ability comes from their spring-loaded leg joints and energy-storing muscle fibers. But this same system has limitations we can exploit. She manipulated the hologram to show a Zephyrian in mid-leap. They're essentially ballistic objects during flight. Once airborne, they can't change direction or velocity. They're committed to their trajectory until they land. Sarah nodded. Which means if we can predict where they'll land, or better yet, control where they can land, we can turn their greatest strength into a vulnerability. General Martinez studied the display. You're talking about trap systems. I'm talking about reimagining what defense means, Sarah corrected. Walls aren't meant to stop them. They're meant to force specific jump patterns. Obstacles become guidance systems. We don't fight their mobility. We control it. The planning that followed was unlike anything in military history. Human engineers, architects, and strategists worked around the clock to design defensive systems based on channeling rather than stopping enemy movement. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Dr. James Wright, a civilian architect known for his work on Parker training facilities, was consulted almost as an afterthought. You're thinking about this all wrong, he told the assembled military leadership during his briefing. You're trying to stop people who can jump. But I design spaces for people who love to jump. The secret isn't preventing movement, it's controlling the psychology of movement. Wright activated his own presentation, showing architectural spaces designed for free running and parkour. Humans who practice these disciplines are attracted to certain types of obstacles and repelled by others. They prefer clear landing zones, solid surfaces, and predictable trajectories. They avoid uncertain footing, deceptive surfaces, and confined spaces during landing. Sarah felt pieces clicking together in her mind. You're saying we can design environments that unconsciously influence where they choose to jump. Exactly, Wright confirmed. Make the choices they want to make, the choices that benefit you. Design killing fields that look like attractive targets. The concept was revolutionary. Instead of building walls to keep enemies out, humans would build environments that guided enemies exactly where they wanted them to go, within weeks. Prototype defensive installations were under construction on Mars, far from any civilian populations. The new defensive philosophy was given the code name Project Leapfrog. Colonel Chien found herself in charge of the Mars testing facility, working with teams that included military engineers, Parker experts, animal behaviorists, and even video game designers who understood movement psychology and virtual environments. The first test structures looked nothing like traditional fortifications. Instead of imposing walls and barriers, the installations resembled abstract art sculptures crossed with elaborate jungle gyms. Curved surfaces provided attractive landing zones that funneled jumpers toward specific areas. Elevated platforms offered irresistible targets that placed jumpers in predetermined positions. The testing began with human volunteers trained in parkour and free running. The results were encouraging. Test subjects consistently chose the routes the designers intended, even when presented with alternatives, but the real breakthrough came when they tested against artificial intelligence programs designed to mimic Zephyrian movement patterns. The AI, programmed with the aliens' known preferences for high speed, long-distance leaps, fell into the traps even more consistently than the human test subjects. Sarah stood in the command center, watching as holographic Zephyrians moved through the test environment. Every jump was predicted, every landing zone controlled, but she wasn't satisfied yet. It's good, she told Dr. Wright, but not good enough. We're channeling them, but we're not neutralizing them. We need something more. The answer came from studying Earth's natural predators, Dr. Rachel Kim, a zoologist specializing in jumping spiders and hunting cats, provided the insight that changed everything. Predators that rely on leaping ability have evolved countermeasures, she explained during a late-night strategy session. Web-building spiders create environments that turn an insect's flying ability into a disadvantage. Trapdoor spiders use false surfaces that collapse under weight. Sarah's eyes lit up. Environmental traps that activate during landing. Exactly. Your Zephyrians are strongest during their leaps, but they're most vulnerable at the moment of landing. That's when they're decelerating, dealing with impact forces, and preparing for their next movement. The next generation of test facilities incorporated this principle. Landing zones that appeared solid but were designed to collapse or shift under impact. Surfaces that looked stable but were actually composed of materials that absorbed energy and prevented effective takeoff. For subsequent jumps, the real innovation came when human engineers began thinking about material science. Zephyrian legs were essentially biological springs that stored and released energy. But springs could be dampened and energy storage could be disrupted. Dr. Sarah Kim, a material scientist working on the project, developed a composite surface that looked and felt solid, but was actually composed of millions of microscopic energy-absorbing chambers. When a Zephyrian landed on it, their leg springs would compress normally, but the energy would be absorbed by the surface rather than stored for the next jump. It's like landing on a giant shock absorber, she explained to the test team. They can land safely, but they can't take off effectively. Testing with the AI simulators showed dramatic results. Zephyrians entering the dampening zones found their subsequent jumps reduced to barely 10% of their normal range. They became nearly as immobile as humans, but Sarah knew they needed more than clever surfaces. They needed weapon systems designed for the new warfare paradigm. Traditional human weapons were designed to hit targets that moved in predictable patterns on the ground, behind cover, following terrain features. But Zephyrians moved through three-dimensional space in ballistic arcs that were predictable. Only if you could calculate them quickly enough. The solution came from combining human computational power with an understanding of ballistic physics. automated targeting systems that could calculate Zephyrian jump trajectories and fire at where they would be rather than where they were. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb, formerly an artillery officer, led the weapons development team. "It's like shooting skeet," he explained to Sarah during a demonstration. "The target follows a predictable arc. The challenge is processing the calculation fast enough to get a firing solution." Human computers, it turned out, were very good at that kind of calculation. Within milliseconds of a Zephyrian beginning a jump, the new defensive systems could predict their entire flight path and target their landing zone with devastating accuracy. The weapons themselves were also revolutionary. Instead of trying to hit fast-moving targets in flight, the systems were designed to make landing zones uninhabitable. Area denial weapons that activated when the targeting computers detected incoming Zephyr IANS. Sarah watched a test run where holographic Zephyrians attempted to assault a defended position. The alien AI, programmed with all known Zephyrian preferences and capabilities, chose what appeared to be optimal jump routes through the defensive installation. Every single holographic alien was eliminated before completing their assault. The combination of channeling surfaces, energy-dampening landing zones, and predictive targeting systems created a kill zone that was literally inescapable for jumping attackers. But the Zephyrian war fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system like a cloud of metallic locusts. 57 ships ranging from massive assault carriers to sleek reconnaissance vessels, all designed around the principle that had given the Zephyrians dominance over 17 worlds. Deploy troops who could leap over any defense. Admiral Kethver, promoted from his diplomatic role after successfully evaluating human military capabilities, stood in the command center of the flagship Boundless Sky. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, he could see the blue-green world that would be the 18th conquest for the Zephyrian Empire. Initial scans confirm human defensive positions on the primary continent, reported his intelligence officer, Scout Commander Wraithavel. Multiple fortified installations, but the structures conform to predicted patterns based on human limitations. Kethver's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. Walls, trenches, and ground-based weapon emplacements. Exactly what we expected from a species that crawls instead of leaps. The first phase of invasion proceeded according to standard Zephyrian doctrine. Reconnaissance drones mapped human defensive positions while the main fleet established orbital supremacy. The humans offered no resistance in space. Their few patrol ships retreated toward the planet's surface, rather than engage in hopeless combat. "Curious," noted General Skethmore as he reviewed the tactical displays. "The human fleet is withdrawing without attempting to delay our deployment. Either they're more cowardly than our intelligence suggested, or what?" Admiral Kethver asked. "Or they're confident in their ground defenses. But that makes no sense given what we observed during the diplomatic mission." The Admiral studied the planetary scan data more carefully. The human defensive installations were certainly impressive. In scale, massive structures that stretched across significant portions of the continent. But they looked wrong somehow. Traditional fortifications were designed to present imposing barriers to ground-based attackers. These human installations seemed almost inviting open spaces, elevated platforms, and clear sight lines that would actually facilitate Zephyrian assault tactics. "Perhaps," Kethver mused, "they're finally acknowledging the futility of trying to wall us out." "These positions look almost designed to accommodate our mobility," General Skethmore agreed. "The humans may have realized that attempting to block us is hopeless. Better to design positions that channel our attacks in predictable directions, where their weapons can engage us most effectively." It was a reasonable tactical assessment based on everything the Zephyrians knew about warfare. What they didn't know was that they were looking at the most sophisticated trap in military history, designed specifically to exploit their assumptions about their own invincibility. Colonel Sarah Chun stood in the command bunker beneath Installation Alpha 7, watching the alien fleet take positions in orbit. Around her, technicians monitored systems that represented 4 years of intensive development and 2 years of frantic construction. Fleet deployment matches predicted patterns, reported Major Williams at the tactical station. They're preparing for standard assault doctrine. Orbital bombardment followed by troop deployment to predetermined landing zones, Sarah nodded, studying the holographic display that showed Zephyr ships positioning themselves above each human defensive installation. Any deviation from expected behavior? They're following the same pattern they've used on 17 previous worlds. Fast orbital assault, overwhelming troop deployment, rely on mobility to bypass defensive positions. Good, Sarah said. The more confident they are, the better our chances. The human defensive network stretched across 3 continents. But the primary battle would be fought here, where the largest concentration of civilian population centers provided an irresistible target for Zephyrian aggression. 7 major installations formed an interconnected defense network, each one a masterpiece of engineering psychology designed to channel alien behavior in specific directions. Dr. Wright, now holding the military rank of major despite his civilian background, monitored the environmental systems that were the heart of their strategy. All channeling surfaces are active. Energy dampening fields at optimal levels. Predictive targeting systems are online and tracking orbital positions. Sarah felt the weight of humanity's future pressing down on her shoulders. If Project Leapfrog failed, if the Zephyrians proved more adaptable than human intelligence suggested, then Earth and all human colonies would follow the fate of 17 other worlds. The orbital bombardment began at dawn local time. Zephyrian energy weapons carved precise patterns of destruction across the landscape, eliminating what appeared to be human command centers, communications arrays, and weapons positions, but the bombardment was surprisingly limited. The aliens had learned from their previous conquests that excessive orbital fire could damage valuable infrastructure and resources. Better to eliminate obvious defensive positions and let their superior ground forces handle any remaining resistance. Sarah watched the tactical display as predetermined decoy positions were methodically destroyed. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. Bombardment ceasing, reported Major Williams, detecting troop transport deployment from the main fleet. The real battle was about to begin. Admiral Kethver led the first assault wave personally, his command armor gleaming as he dropped through the atmosphere in a specialized assault pod designed to deliver Zephyrian warriors directly into combat zones. Around him, 10,000 of the Empire's finest soldiers prepared for what should be a routine conquest. Their armor incorporated the same spring-loaded technology as their natural physiology, enhancing their already impressive jumping abilities to truly superhuman levels. As the assault pod screened through the atmosphere toward Installation Alpha 7, Kethver reviewed the tactical situation one final time. The human defensive position was certainly impressive in size, but its design seemed to actively invite the kind of high-mobility assault that was the Zephyrian specialty. All units, remember your objectives, he broadcast to the assault force. Secure the command centers, neutralize defensive weapons, and establish perimeter control. Standard doctrine applies. Use your mobility to bypass fixed defenses and strike at vulnerable points. The pods impacted in the designated landing zones with thunderous crashes, their energy-absorbing systems allowing safe deployment despite tremendous impact forces. Within seconds, Zephyrian warriors were emerging and assessing their environment. From his command pod, Admiral Kethver surveyed the human installation with growing confidence. The defensive position stretched before them like an elaborate obstacle course, full of elevated platforms, strategic gaps, and vertical surfaces that practically begged to be used as launching points for spectacular leaps. Forward, he commanded, and 10,000 Zephyrian warriors began their assault. The initial advance proceeded exactly as doctrine dictated. Zephyrian soldiers bounded between defensive positions, their incredible jumping ability allowing them to cross obstacles that would have stopped conventional ground forces instantly. But something felt wrong almost immediately. The first hint of trouble came when Assault Leader Vexstar, the same scout who had experienced the test course on Mars, landed on what appeared to be a solid defensive rampart. The surface felt subtly different from normal construction materials. slightly yielding in a way that reminded him unpleasantly of his experience during the cultural exchange. "Command, this is Assault Team 7, he reported. "The defensive surfaces are exhibiting unusual properties. Recommend caution in approach vectors." Admiral Keffer dismissed the report as combat nerves. Scout Vexstar had been acting strangely ever since his return from the human territories, occasionally making odd comments about human engineering capabilities. But within minutes, similar reports were coming in from assault teams across the installation. Soldiers were finding their landing zones less solid than expected, their subsequent jumps reduced in range and effectiveness. "All teams adapt movement patterns as necessary," Keffer ordered. "Press the assault. Do not allow minor surface variations to slow our advance." But the problems were getting worse. Zephyrian warriors who prided themselves on ballistic grace through three-dimensional combat were stumbling, miscalculating distances, and finding themselves trapped in positions that should have offered multiple escape routes. The Admiral finally understood what was happening when he attempted to showcase Lept to demonstrate proper technique. His intended 60-foot bound to a prominent command platform ended abruptly when his legs encountered the energy-dampening surface, and his next jump barely carried him 20 feet to a secondary position. "Trap!" He broadcast to all units, but it was too late. The human defensive installation wasn't designed to stop Zephyrian mobility, it was designed to control and redirect it. Every surface, every platform, every gap had been carefully calculated to channel alien movement into specific patterns while gradually degrading their jumping capability. And now that the Zephyrians were exactly where the humans wanted them, the real defense systems activated. Sarah watched from her command bunker as 10,000 of the galaxy's most mobile warriors suddenly found themselves unable to move effectively.